Welcome back to the Section 5 podcast. I'm your host, Trey. I'm here with my guy, Adam. We are one half of the Section 5 podcast. Thanks for listening. We are back. It's been a wild off season. A lot of moves have been made by the new president of basketball operations, Brad Stevens.
Blockbuster.
Yes, Blockbuster Brad. He's been at it all off season. We're about a month away from NBA training camp. It'll start September 28th. So we have about a month. The Celtics currently have 16 players under contract, fully guaranteed contracts. They'll have to get that number down to 15 at the end of training camp. 17 actually, including two-way players. But as far as guaranteed roster spots, they will have to get that number down to 15. So in the coming month or so, Brad Stevens will have some more moves to make. We'll see if he makes some trades or picks up, some additional players. So without further ado, we're just going to get into the latest moves for the Celtics front office, the extensions that they've been signing. We're going to talk a little bit about one of our newest acquisitions, Dennis Schroeder. So we're going to get started. The first extension that was given out by Brad Stevens was Marcus Smart. And it made a lot of sense. He was the most important domino of this offseason outside of Evan Fournier. Evan Fournier, by the way, was technically signed and traded to the New York Knicks. He chose the Knicks in free agency. Brad Stevens was able to get a TPE, another traded player exception, worth about $17 million. And that is the Celtics compensation for Evan Fournier. They only had to give up 2 second-round picks. One was heavily protected and unlikely to convey. And so Marcus Smart, after you lose Evan Fournier, he becomes the biggest domino for the Celtics and the most important key. After hiring Coach Ime Udoka, in his press conferences, he heaped a lot of praise for Marcus Smart, said that he would have the ball in his hands a lot more. And he said that in his initial press conference. So one would come to believe that Marcus Smart was a priority this offseason, and Brad Stevens showed that that is the case. Everybody assumed that Danny Ainge really, really loved Marcus Smart. And, according to guys like Chris Mannix, there may have been some pause there when it comes to Brad Stevens and Marcus Smart. But we see that that's not necessarily the case. Marcus Smart signed, his max was 4 years, $77 million. And he's going to be getting $74 million. So 74 M's. I know Marcus had a song called 52 M's. Now he's going to hopefully have a song called 74 M's. So yeah. So what did you think, Adam, about Marcus Smart's extension? Did you think that it was warranted? Did you think that it was too much? What did you think?
I'm under the feeling that even with this extension, that Marcus Smart is underpaid in the NBA, because you could argue that, you see what contract Fournier got, and you could argue that Smart has a bigger impact on the game than Evan Fournier would, because Evan Fournier, if he's hot, yeah, he's gonna get you buckets, but he's not really gonna do too much on the defensive end. He was a little competitive for us, but you would never confuse him with an all NBA defender. While Marcus Smart now, I think the extension helps us twofold. One, in that it gives Smart the security, that he has this guaranteed contract on his name, that he doesn't have to, play out of his mind, try to do too much. Now he could just focus on, hopefully being the point guard of this team and being the leader that we need him to be on both ends of the court. Because we can say all we want how Smart shot us out of games sometimes, but there was also plenty of games where Smart shooting kept us in the games. And his defense he's the best perimeter defender in our team, bar none. So while it also gives him the security, it also gives us flexibility in that we have another like mid-tier contract that if a superstar became available and Smart sometimes will become expendable for the right type of player. So I think that this year is a big year, not only for the C's, but also for Smart to show that he could really be the playmaker on this team and be a productive player next to Smart, next to Brown and Tatum and all the young kids that we got to make everyone better.
Yeah, so once again, 4 years, 77 million for Marcus Smart. It was, in my opinion, was a good contract. Like you said, I think it's below his value. His max was the 77 million. He said he wouldn't take a dollar less when his free agency came around next time. He said that a few years ago, and he lived up to that word. He didn't take a dollar less than his max, 77 million.
Yeah, but even though that was his max, I think a guy like Smart easily has a market value of over 20 million a year, especially in this NBA.
Yeah, agreed. And I just think that it hammers the point that you have to look at the landscape of the league going forward. And that's what, Dennis Schroeder and his agent should have done. I'm not, exactly sure how they viewed the landscape of the NBA this offseason and the amount of teams that had cap space, because there were quite, a few options that they could have had. But if you look forward to next offseason, as currently projected, there's not many teams that are going to have tons of cap space. I think it's like 3 teams, the Spurs, the Grizzlies, and the Pistons. So
yeah, I don't want to harp on Schroeder too much now because we're talking about Smart, but like, what were him and his agent thinking? Like, if he wanted to play for a contender, there weren't really any contenders with major cap space that could have paid him the 4 for 80 that the Lakers offered him. So, regardless, I think even if he did sign the extension, he probably would have been traded for Russie because,
right.
no one knew about Russie wanting to go to the Lakers, but, Schroeder could have still had $80 million and ended up, on the Wizards next year. But
Worst case scenario, the Lakers are unable to throw him into the rush trade. And the Wizards say they want what they got, and they want that only. They don't want Schroeder, and he stays on the bench as a 6-man behind Russ again. That's the
right.
worst case scenario, making 24 mil a year. But yeah, just to hammer down that point, I wanted to talk about the 3 teams that had cap space projected for next offseason. So it's not really looking too great in terms of if you're a free agent next offseason. Like Marcus Smart was supposed to be. Robert Williams was going to be a restricted. We'll talk about him next, but wasn't that good of a market for them. So to see Marcus Smart get that money now is a good thing for him, and it's also good for the team.
Right.
So moving on, the second guy to get an extension was the Time Lord, aka I like to call him Robert Williams. A lot of people call him Time Lord. I got a few nicknames for him. I got
Yes, Lord.
Rob Williams, yes, Lord.
When he's playing bad, I call him Bob Williams.
Whenever he catches a lob, I call him Rob City. Instead of Lob City, it's Rob City. But Robert Williams signed a 4-year extension, and that was worth $54 million. And I think that was also a really good deal. I think it was reported that it has some incentives included. And with those incentives, his base salary for his first year of his extension is going to be about 11 million, and then it'll increase every year after that. And there are some incentives inside of that contract for staying healthy, and also some defensive incentives as well. So Adam, what did you think of Time Lord's extension? Good, bad, and how do you feel about it moving forward?
I mean, I think it's a good extension. I mean, ever since Williams got drafted by the Celtics, my opinion of him has always been he's a guy that brings something to the table that we don't have. That explosive athletic ability as a big, being able to finish at a over 70% clip so far in his NBA career, and being a threat to block every shot that's taken anywhere on the court. We've all seen the inconsistency of him, which kind of, some people might have been soured at the amount of money we gave him. But I mean, he's 23. Those guys don't just grow on trees. You have to, now he has the same as Smart. He has that, confidence that he has this long-term deal. He doesn't have to worry about playing perfectly every night. It's just about, taking care of his body and just playing effectively on a night-to-night basis. And now it's his, I think, fourth year in the system. Like, it's time to see what he can bring to the table. And we saw flashes of that in the Brooklyn series. In the game, I think he almost had a triple-double before he got hurt. So I like the extension, and hopefully Williams is a key contributor. At the same token, same with Smart. It also gives us that mid-level type of contract that, if he doesn't work out with us next year and he's a little too inconsistent for Brad and Ime's liking, that we could include him in a deal. And, it's not really an albatross type of contract. It's, a pretty mid-level deal in the current NBA landscape. So, I mean, I'm all for the trade, just like we were for the Smart trade. I mean, for the Smart extension.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, it's 4 years, 54 million, but it's going to be 48 million guaranteed. The rest is going to be in incentives. Robert Williams in 2022-23, which is when the extension will kick in, he'll be making about $10.7 million, and it'll increase every year after that. The last year of the deal in 2025-26 will be worth about 13.3 million. So I think that's a really good contract.
Yeah.
His comparison coming into the NBA, the hope for him was, you heard a lot of Clint Capella's name.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when Clint Capella signed his extension after, having his rookie deal being up, he got about, roughly around the same amount. It was about 13.7 mil or so in his first year of his extension. And there was no incentives, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So when you compare Rob to something like that, I really like his contract. Even if he was getting the whole 54 million, I think that he would still prove worth it as long as he stays healthy. Rob can play 25 minutes and we don't have to force it on him too much. But as long as he stays healthy for the games that he plays, I think that he'll be, a really big factor in what we're doing going forward. And I also said coming into the league that, I'd give him 3 solid years, and that by year 4, we would need to see, Clint Capella or better. We wanted to give him time to be patient, give him some time to develop, but we had high hopes for the 27th pick, and I think it's kind of paying off. I said also that he was the X factor, not in this past playoffs, but the previous season. I said that he was the X factor. We played Toronto. We had the double big lineup with Tice, Robert Williams at times. But yeah, Robert Williams was an X factor in the playoffs. Again, not last season, but the season before.
Mhm.
He played really good for us. Um, you know, didn't get too many minutes. So I think coming into this season, hopefully, maybe he gets to start. I'm not exactly sure. But if he does, hopefully he takes this opportunity and he never looks back.
Yeah, I think it'd be perfect if, he solidified the starting role in this team and let Al just come in off the bench and give us, 18 to 20 hard minutes. So, Williams will be able to run with the starters and Al could just play make with that second unit.
So yeah, the first domino to fall in free agency for the Celtics was Evan Fournier and Marcus Smart and Robert Williams extension. And the latest domino to fall was Josh Richardson. Josh Richardson got an extra year added on to his 1-year deal. He was currently on a 1-year deal worth 11.6 million. That is now 2 years, 24 million. So next year he'll be making just about, $12 million. So he gets an additional year, and I think it's a win-win for both sides. And also, the Celtics basically go from appearing to be a cap space team to losing Fournier in free agency and re-signing or extending all of these guys. So they're no longer going to be a cap space team next off season. So what are you thinking about Richardson's extension? Do you think that was a good idea? Were you kind of confused about it? What were your thoughts?
I mean, my first thought was that's a bait contract to trade right there. It gives us, while it gives Richardson, the veteran, a security of another year coming to him, that's guaranteed fully. It also gives us another one of those mid-tier contracts to trade if, someone else becomes available. And I would be shocked if Richardson's a Celtic next year. I think that he knows what the deal is. He came over here. He's going to try to, up his value again after having, a down year in Dallas last year. And I think it's a win-win because we get the type of wing defender that we need this year for this team to show guys like Langford, Naismith how to be professionals, how to, carry themselves on a night-to-night basis. And it also gives us a chance for next year to, while we won't have the money to be a cap space team in free agency, we'll have the contracts to be able to trade for, a premier player in this league.
Yeah, I will say if he does not make it to the end of that contract with the Celtics, I think he and Grant Williams are a package deal. I will say that because they are pretty close. And I don't think that they would mind being a package deal. But yeah, both sides, the Celtics and Josh Richardson, agree to that contract. It makes sense for both sides. For Richardson, I just named the 3 teams that are projected to have cap space as of right now for next offseason. The Grizzlies, the Pistons, and the Spurs. It's not many teams. So if you're Josh Richardson, most likely weren't going to get more than that 12 million.
Yeah.
And there's a possibility that you might get like the taxpayers mid-level, which will be around 10 million next year.
Yeah.
So you're guaranteeing the 12 million. If you're Josh Richardson, it's an easy decision for you. You want to be able to provide for your family. So that's a good decision on his end. And then for the Celtics, it just provides them with more flexibility for the 2022 offseason. They'll be able to have lots more flexibility in trades. Everybody knows that the Celtics would like to add more talent. It could be by way of a third all-star or, even really good role players being added to the team. The Celtics seem to usually go the third all-star route. So it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do. But what I have noticed about the contract structures is that, theoretically you could keep both of the Jays, And then you could say, you want to keep Marcus Smart, and you could even try and keep Robert Williams. And next offseason, you'd have Al Horford guaranteed for 14.5 million. You'd have Josh Richardson, 12 million. It's about 26.5 or 27 million or so. And then you start to add some of the other guys in, like your Romeo Langfords, Peyton Pritchard, or Grant Williams, and suddenly you're at you've got enough money to trade for a star.
Yep.
So I do think that it was some really good moves made by Brad Stevens, because we all want to keep every good player on the Celtics, but he's given us a realistic avenue where we can, keep those players and, maybe give up a pick package or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's feasible that it could happen. At least Marcus Smart, probably doesn't have to be part of a blockbuster trade that Brad Stevens makes.
Right. And I think that was a key part of the offseason in making sure that, you have other guys to trade other than your core of guys that you want to keep. And I think that definitely, there was some ridiculous discussions about including Jaylen Brown in a trade for, Lillard or even for Beal. And I'm like, we're not trading Tatum or Brown. So we now got those mid type of contracts that we could stack a couple of them up together instead of having a trade, one of our premier guys to get somebody.
Yeah, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about Dame Lillard, Brad Beal. They don't seem to go away. I know Bleacher Report put out something, and I usually don't pay too much attention to Bleacher Report, but nonetheless, people do, and you see these things on your timeline. So there was some discussion about getting not Brad Beal, getting Damian Lillard to Boston without giving up the Jays, Marcus Smart, or Rob. So kind of like what I was alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very unrealistic right now,
Mm-hmm.
being that Dame hasn't even asked for a trade. I'll just say this. Next offseason, I like the Celtics' chances of going after either probably one of three players. Brad Beal, you got to see what happens with the Bulls and Zach LaVine. And then I think there's the inevitable Dame Lillard trade. And my hunch is that Dame Lillard or Brad Beal pick Golden State or Boston, one or the other. Whichever goes to Boston, the other ends up in Golden State.
Yeah, the only thing that that I could say about that, I don't really like talking about rumors. I hate talking about rumors. They don't, to me, 99% of them don't even happen. But I think it's realistic that if we do trade for a big name star, it's going to be someone that falls in the age range that Jaylen and Jason are at. I don't think it's going to be a guy like Beal who's going to be in his 30s. The guy like Lillard is going to be in his 30s. It's more realistically going to be a guy like LaVine, going to be a guy like, maybe Towns that is still in their 20s, mid 20s, that, they could grow years together instead of getting guys at the tail end of their prime where we're only going to get 1 or 2 good years out of them. And, that just increases the possibility of frustrating Tatum and Brown into, wanting to go somewhere else if it doesn't work out here.
And the only reason I will have to disagree with that is because if you get Lillard here for the next 4 years or so, that's going to bring you to the end of Jason Tatum's extension that he signed. And by then, he's going to be ready to move on with whatever, he's going to be ready to roll with the punches. So if we bring Damian Lillard here and we don't get a championship, it's still going to be him and Jaylen Brown, hopefully, and they'll be ready to recruit the next young guy in place of.
To me, it almost seems like I don't want to get a guy that's, thinks that they're better than Tatum and Brown. I think Tatum and Brown need to be the leaders of this team. And whoever third guy we bring, obviously I want him to be as talented as them, but I don't want, there to be them hopping over them in the pecking order, because I feel like Tatum and Brown feel like this is their franchise and that they're going to run the show And, we just need guys that are gonna just, step in line. And while it'll be nice to get a guy like Lillard, yeah, it'll be awesome. But I don't know. I like Tatum and Brown leading this team. And if we're gonna get a third guy, it's gonna be a guy that's gonna complement them, not necessarily be taking the ball out of their hands too much.
Yeah, I would just say that player just needs to know their worth. That's an important thing. And knowing your worth doesn't mean that you have to think too highly of yourself, because you don't want to do that. Dame Lillard, Brad Beal, I think those are both better fits than Kemba Walker. And
Yeah,
Kemba Walker wasn't going to pull up from the logo like Lillard. So I definitely would welcome that type of confidence of Dame Lillard, that type of shot making. I think that he would, stretch the floor like crazy for the Jays. So it would only be a good move. But, we'll see what happens down the road. But these types of conversations are now possible because of Brad Stevens and the moves that he's made this offseason. And one move that we've kind of glanced over, I know we briefly mentioned his name, Dennis Schroeder. We signed him. Brad Stevens got him for $5.9 million. That's the taxpayers' mid-level exception. Nice bargain. I'm sure you're going to hear his name all season, whether good, bad, trade deadline. You're going to hear a lot about Dennis Schroeder. So, Adam, what were your thoughts on the Celtics signing Dennis Schroeder? And do you think that there's a chance that, he could potentially be in the running for Sixth Man of the Year?
I mean, I kind of thought that it was going to happen once a lot of the cap space dried out, especially for the Knicks. You saw the moves they did. And there wasn't too many teams this year that had that space that had the space and that had the need for a starting point guard. Other than teams that weren't contenders. And a guy like Schroeder, he seems like he wants to win. He doesn't want to go to a team where you're just going to play 40 minutes a game and get numbers. He wants to actually, play in games that mean something. And he got a little taste of that last year with the Lakers. And obviously I'm pretty sure he's regretting not taking that offer that was offered to him in the middle of last year. But, the C's gave him the chance that, to rehabilitate his image, to try to get, some team with some space next year to take the plunge on him. But I love the move. You get a veteran that is just buckets off the bench, can be a point guard on a team, is a great distributor, could play defense. He's a pretty good defender on the other end. And he was a guy that whenever he played the Celtics, we hated him because he always got into the mix with our point guards, whether it was IT, whether it was Rondo. It seemed like every time we played Schroeder, there was a double technical involved. So I like that he's now in our squad. We got like him and Smart, kind of like some bulldogs, defending the guard position. And while I don't think they'll be playing too much together on the court, it gives a lot of flexibility to some lineups that, Stevens could throw out there. And, Schroeder isn't really a knockdown 3-point shooter. He's respectable from out there. And in games that he's hot, he could fill it up like no one else in the league. So I love the move. And for your last question, I think that he's definitely could be in the running for Sixth Man of the Year. He was before. I don't know if he won the Sixth Man of the Year before, but I remember when he was playing he was playing in OKC with Rusty, and he was a pretty dynamic option off the bench, and he seems like he'll be comfortable coming off the bench because not only we have our set roles here, but also his salary for this year is only $5.9 million. So that makes it a little easier, I would think, for him to accept any role that we want to give him in order for him to get as much money as he can in his next contract.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people forget that Dennis Schroeder was part of that 60-win Hawks team that played good basketball. So was Al Horford. So they'll be reuniting on the Celtics, and we'll see what happens with Paul Millsap. I don't know that he'll join the Celtics, but would be nice, a reunion. But yeah, a 1-year deal, $5.9 million for Dennis Schroeder. I think that's the steal of free agency, to be honest.
Yeah. Definitely.
Going to come off your bench. Like you said, he's going to provide a lot of hustle, a lot of grit. He's not going to back down from anybody. Love how he got in Kyrie's face when he called Kyrie the N-word. He was just using the word, and Kyrie didn't like that, and so Kyrie told him about it, and I guess he let Kyrie know that he doesn't care what he thinks. So I appreciate that, and we'll see if those two have a dust up or anything this next coming season.
I'm gonna bet money that, I don't know if you want to take this bet, but that Schroeder and Kyrie will have a double effect next year in one of the games. I don't think you should take that bet, Trey.
I don't want to take that bet. I'm hoping that it comes true, though. I'm certainly hoping that it comes true. And Dennis Schroeder, we've got to watch out for his name at the trade deadline. I'm just going to speak this right now. If he's having a really good year, I think it'll remind us of the Marcus Morris situation. When Marcus Morris was here, the Celtics had a stacked roster, and the thought process, if you're a GM, is one, that he's cool with Jason Tatum. Two, you don't want to mess up the whatever chemistry we were going to have left of that roster by trading Marcus Morris, and you don't want any one thing to be the cause of the downfall of that season. So letting it play out and letting Marcus Morris leave and go elsewhere when he became a free agent is a consequence. And I'm not sure if we want the same thing to happen with Schroeder. If he's playing decently well, and let's say we also have Peyton Pritchard playing well. Let's say Chris Dunn has come off the bench every now and then, giving us a few minutes of good defense. Brad Stevens might decide that Peyton Pritchard and Chris Dunn are enough to man the fort for the remainder of the season. And he could decide, hey, I want to trade Dennis Schroeder, get, maybe a player back or a couple of second round picks and move on to the offseason. And there's also, can't leave out the possibility that a star asks for a trade sometime mid-season, and the Celtics will be ready. They will have Marcus Smart on the last year of his current deal, making about $14 million. Robert Williams will not be tradable under his extension salary. Instead, he'll be making about $2 million. Josh Richardson is making $11.6 million this year. And then you've got Al Horford, who's making $27 million this year. So he's a big trade chip at the deadline. His salary could be used in a trade for a star. And then there's some other tradable salaries that we have, including Schroeder. So just wanted to just hammer that point. The Celtics have a lot of flexibility going forward because of the moves that have been made this offseason. The picture's a lot clearer than it was heading into the offseason. Where the Celtics going to be a cap space team? Were they going to, give extensions to these players? Were they going to re-sign Evan Fournier? So Brad Stevens has helped get a lot of these questions answered. And I know Celtics fans are excited for this upcoming season. In particular, I know the schedule came out and Kevin Garnett is going to be returning home March 13th. It's around St. Patty's time. So that's going to be a really, really, really good game at the Garden. I hope that I can go. Hope that the whole Section 5 crew can go. I can't wait for that type of game, man. The atmosphere at the Garden, I know it's going to be lit.
No, me and G going to be there.
Yes, sir. So, without further ado, we're signing out. It's been a great pod. Talk to you Celtics fans later.
Let's go C's.